Hello, hello, hello. All right, everyone, thanks for coming. My name is Jason Seuss. I'm a principal technical evangelist at Microsoft. I work in a team within Microsoft that evangelizes specifically our media delivery technologies and work with major customers to put together media delivery solutions. For instance, what we just finished with NBC for the Olympics and with CTV and with NRK. And what I'm here to talk to you about today is something called the Silverlight Rough Cut Editor. And I would think that most of you, since this is something fairly new, the most you know about it is probably just from the abstract that was written for the session. So thanks for coming. Thanks for your interest in checking it out. And one thing that I'll note just at the beginning is that the Rough Cut Editor is many things, and I'll try to cover many of those things. But for the purposes of this session, I'm going to keep very much scoped to how we use the Rough Cut Editor for the Olympics, because I think that gives us a good entry point by showing specifically how those customers use the Rough Cut Editor and the value they extracted from it. I think it's a good entry point, and then I can point you to more information to how you can learn more about the RC and more of its capabilities. So before we get started, I'm just going to go ahead and jump right over to my demo machine here. And I just want to show you kind of what we're talking about here. We use the Rough Cut Editor during the Olympics, and each of the three broadcasters that used it to produce video clips. And this just is a sample of one of the video clips that we produced. And basically, during the session, what I want to do is I want to talk to you about why we use the Rough Cut Editor to build these clips and the specific value that it provided and kind of the workflow that we use. And I'll run through a pretty extensive demo of actually building this clip so you can see kind of the workflow that we use to build something like this. So what you'll see here is what I've got is a highlight clip of top goals of the day, hockey goals of the day. You can see I'm moving between hockey streams. So that's it. We'll just end that now. And let's get started. Okay. All right, now one more thing before I get started. We've got a pretty small room, and so I feel pretty comfortable in allowing you guys to ask questions throughout the presentation. I'm going to keep an eye on time. If we start to get slow, then I'll maybe cut it off. But for now, I'd rather have you guys raise your hand, and I'll try to answer some questions in case there's some concepts that you need a little help with before we move on. Okay, so first off, what is it? Why did we build this Rough Cut Editor? What does it do for me? What is the value it provides? So that's the foundation I'm going to try to establish first. So first off, before I really go there, I should talk about the genesis. And specifically for the Olympics, the genesis of the Rough Cut Editor was a post-mortem discussion that we had with NBC coming out of the Beijing Olympics. And one of the problems that they had, one of the pain points that they had was that if you think back to the Beijing Olympics, what was the major story that was going on? And it was Michael Phelps and him winning all of his gold medals. And so one of the really important things for NBC was getting clips. Each time Michael won one of those gold medals, there'd be a massive rush to the site. People would learn about that through all their various news channels, and they would rush to the site to see a little clip of that, of him winning his latest gold medal. And with the traditional video production methods of an editor sitting down at an edit bay, cutting a clip, going through approvals, going through transcode, upload to the site, it was just taking too long to get those video clips to the site. They needed to have it there within minutes so that when there was that rush to the site, that they could meet that demand. And if they don't have it, obviously it's a very, very big missed opportunity. People come, they don't see it, and they go away. So lost opportunity. So that was kind of the driving force, the driving idea, the business need behind it. So the number one goal in building, we didn't even know what a Rough Cut Editor was at the time. We just had this need. And the number one need was a faster time to market. And so what we started to think about was, well, we've already got these video assets. We've already got Michael winning that gold medal. It's already encoded. It's sitting on our origin servers. Why can't we just repurpose that asset We don't want to dump users into the live stream and have them seeking around to try to find him. We want to repurpose that existing video asset into a short form clip that we can point users to and they can immediately play it back and digest it. But the main idea is that our coverage of the Olympics already covered every minute of every Olympic competition, so we already had that content sitting on Origin. And so kind of to go along with that, since we've already got it sitting on Origin, why do we need to transcode it? Why do we need to go all the way back to a master, transcode it, and re-upload it to the site? That's just adding time to the whole process. And so the biggest thing is we want to be able to publish that asset within seconds of him winning the gold medal so that we're there and ready to meet that demand when it comes. And then kind of what goes along with all of this is a reduction in costs. Traditional video editing is expensive. You have video editing workstations, you have transcode hardware. All this stuff is very expensive. And again, I've already got it. It's already encoded. It's already sitting on my Origin. I can just reuse it and have a dramatic reduction in costs there. And then lastly, they wanted something that was web-based. So again, traditional video editing is done at a dedicated workstation. That means physically I have to be where that workstation is. I have to bring all my video editors into a single location, which is expensive in itself. What if I had a web-based tool that allowed me to access this video anywhere, where I can get a web connection in a browser and do my video editing right there within the browser? So this was the genesis. These were the main driving factors, the ideas behind the rough cut editor. So what we did next was kind of take a look around. How are we going to accomplish this? We had some ideas. We did some looking around, and we found that a partner of ours named Southworks already had a tool that was most of the way there. I would say it's about 75% of the way there. It was a web-based video editing tool. It could do multiple cuts, assemble clips. Didn't know how to work with smooth streaming, but nobody did at the time. Smooth streaming was very new. So essentially, we took that tool from Southworks, and we started working with them to grow it into what you'll see here throughout the presentation. So again, what is it? So we had the business needs, and here's kind of the requirements that we were driving towards. So first off, it's web-based. It's multi-platform. I think everybody understands that. Multi-cut. Now, what I mean by that is I don't just want to do a single cut. In other words, I don't want to reach into Michael Phelps' the live video of the 100-meter breaststroke and just cut him out. I may want to assemble a multi-cut highlight like that hockey clip that I was showing, where I may show a goal from one stream, a goal from another, and a goal from another, and assemble those multiple cuts into a single asset. Now, the output of the rough cut editor is an edit decision list. Any of you that come from a video editing background will know what an edit decision list is. And that can be used in a couple of different ways. Most importantly here for the Olympics, again, since I'm going to focus on the Olympics, what we did was we took that EDL and we transformed it into a smooth streaming composite manifest. And I'll talk more specifically about what that is here in a few minutes. But I could also take that edit decision list if I'm not working with smooth streaming or I want to have a more traditional video asset, and I could run it through transcode to actually produce a whole new WMV or MPEG-4 or whatever else. The next thing is integration with CMS. So that's an important part. I'm creating a new video asset, so I need access to all the existing assets, so I need to plug into the CMS to be able to get that list and then plug my resulting asset back in. And then metadata integration. So not only do I want to produce a video asset, but I want to describe metadata about it. And some of the interesting things that we can do here are things like build timeline markers, and I'll show that. We can do annotations. We can do ad insertion. We can generate thumbnails using video image captures from within the video stream. And the last thing is that the RCE is really an extensible tool. And so again, I'm going to focus on how we used it for the Olympics, how we customized it for the Olympics, some of the custom components that we built to fit within our scenario. But the important thing is that the RCE is architected in such a way that you can take it, extend it to meet your specific needs, build modules for it, customize it, fit it into your CMS, and deploy it for your scenario. So the main thing, and again, focusing on the Olympics, the main thing that I want you to take away from this is that It's a tool for taking existing smooth streams, both live and on demand, and grabbing chunks out of them and repurposing them to create a new video asset. And then maybe the most important feature of it is that it's a free tool. And later on in the deck, I'll give you a pointer to where you can download it. And it's actually available today for your use. So that's obviously an important part to mention. All right, so I want to focus, before we go too much further, I want to focus in again on the RCE and smooth streaming. I talked about how really the most important part was to take existing assets and repurpose them to build a new asset. And how is that done? Let me get a quick show of hands. How many people are familiar with smooth streaming? Excellent. All right, then I don't have to establish much of a baseline there. So the basic concept here is that obviously with smooth streams, what we've already done is we've taken that stream and we've broken it up into little 2-second chunks. So essentially all I have to do here to assemble a new asset is to create a composite manifest, which is another way to thinking of it is it's a playlist. So essentially I have an XML document, which is my composite manifest. It points at each of the source streams, so Hockey Stream 1, Hockey Stream 2, and then specifically within those streams, it points at the individual fragments within that stream that I want to play. So as you see in this example, my new hockey highlight, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach out and I'm going to play 5 fragments from Hockey Stream 1, and then when those are done, I'm going to reach over to Hockey Stream 2 and I'm going to play 8 of those fragments. Now the important thing to note here is that I'm not actually grabbing those fragments and pulling them down into a new asset. I'm simply creating a new manifest. In other words, I'm just pointing at where those fragments already live. So I'm not creating anything new that I have to store other than a small XML file. All right, so that's kind of the underlying platform behind this asset that we're going to create. Now, the other thing that we had to do is we had to work with the smooth streaming team. Yep, quick question.
Yeah, how did you get it out of the origin? You have to do something to get it in there.
Yeah, good question. So the question was, how did you get it out of the origin? Well, what we chose to do, there's any number of ways. You could have taken the RCE and pointed it directly at the origin to play back those video assets. What we chose to do, because we wanted to have location independence, and also we didn't want to have additional load on origin, as we actually just pointed at the edge. So it's the same way everybody else was consuming the video. The RCE just had a URL to the video asset and would play it back that way.
So there was no transformation required to get it into smooth streaming format?
No, like all of our live streaming was done in smooth streaming. So all of our video assets were smooth streaming. Yep. Okay, so as I was saying, we had to work with the smooth streaming team. When we had this original idea, the concept for the RC, we had to go back to the smooth streaming team with the concept and get some support from them to play back these composite manifests. Obviously, they had live smooth streams and they had on-demand smooth streams, but this was somewhat of a new concept of a composite smooth stream that was grabbing fragments from multiple locations. And so basically what you're looking at here, and I won't try to read through all these, but we went to them with a set of requirements. What would the playback experience be like for one of these composite manifests? What kind of end user experience do we want to provide? And the important things here are that when you play back this new composite manifest, it should act just like any other manifest or any other stream. The user shouldn't know any different. In other words, it should have one video timeline. As I transition between source clips, my timeline shouldn't jump back to 0. I should be able to do all the other cool smooth streaming stuff, move up and down through qualities. I should be able to fast forward, rewind, seek around, all that kind of cool stuff. So that's the important part. Okay. So before I move on, I also want to mention what it isn't. And it's definitely not a craft video edit suite. So in other words, I don't see the rough cut editor replacing Premiere or Final Cut Pro or Avid anytime soon. It's purely a rough cut, and you probably saw that a bit from the clip I played. It was pretty rough cuts between the source clips. And so we don't do crossfades, we don't do any audio rubber banding right now or overlay graphics or anything like that. I see this tool continuing to evolve. Maybe it could pick up some of these sorts of features to get the production value of these clips that we produce higher and higher. But I don't think the folks at Avid are going to be scared of this tool anytime soon. So it has a specific purpose. It's not for all of your clips that you're producing. But if you have specific needs, like the scenario that I mentioned earlier, where you need to create a really, really quick asset with a rough cut, get it to your site very quickly, then it fits that need very, very well. Okay. So again, I said I was going to focus on the Olympics. So let's talk about specifically how it was used for the Olympics. So the primary usage scenarios of the RCE is number one. Each of the broadcasters had their broadcast feeds that they were live encoding and pushing to their website. So when I say their broadcast feeds, I'm talking about the stuff that showed up on TV. So, for NBC, Bob Costas and his whole show. And one of the things that these broadcast feeds would have in them is all the broadcast ads. The broadcast would cover multiple different sports, et cetera. So one of the uses of the RCE during the Olympics was to take those broadcast feeds and cut them down. And they would be cut down in a couple of different ways. They would be cut down to just a particular sport. So for instance, if Bob's show covered hockey and curling and men's downhill, maybe we'd just cut out the hockey game in it. The other way that it would be used, we'd cut out the broadcast ads. Can't use those on digital, so we'd cut those out, put in some different interstitials for digital. Lay in some timeline markers, which I'll show you in just a second. So that was usage scenario number one, and that was really the prime usage scenario for CTV and how they use the rough cut editor. The second one is to build short form multi-cut highlights, and that's the sample that I showed, and that's the demo that I'm going to show you of how that's done. But essentially the idea is there again, say I'm an editor and I get tasked with building a highlight clip that covers the top 3 goals of the day in hockey. So I might use the rough cut editor, pull in a couple of different live feeds of hockey, cut out a couple of goals, and then create a quick little 2 or 3 minute highlight clip. And then the last one is single cut highlights. And this is one scenario that NBC had quite a bit. And the scenario here is, obviously with the Olympic events, let's take, say, downhill skiing. Within a downhill skiing stream that may be 3 hours long, you may have 50 competitors within that stream. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to take each one of those 50 competitors and cut out their run into its own little video asset so that, I don't know, say you were a relative of skier X that was obscure and would never show up on TV or something like that. Instead of dumping you into the live stream and having you seek around to try to find your skier, they actually had an individual video asset on their site that you could quickly click on and consume and see just that skier. And so that was a prime scenario for NBC. So what I'm going to do for the demo, I'm going to show the last 2 right there. Okay. So let's just run through a really quick explanation of kind of the workflow of working with the RCE, and then I'll demo this as well here in just a second. But when we sat about to build the RCE, one of the first things we had to do is think through how would video editors interface with this tool? How would they work with it to build these assets that they want to build? And so the first thing is that we have an editor, and kind of their entry point is the CMS. We talked earlier about the importance of the CMS. Obviously, that's where all of your assets live. So that's where they're working day in and day out. So in our case, the CMS was called EBO, and I won't really get into that, but it's built by an Italian company called Delta Tre. that built the CMS for both NBC, CTV, and NRK. And so the editors in EBO, and the first thing they do is create a new video asset. So they're going to basically create an entry in the CMS database, create this new asset, and then they launch the RCE to basically build that asset. And then the first thing they'll do within the RCE is search. So they basically have to find the source material that they're going to use to build that asset, and I'll show you an interface that we have for doing that. But they may want to filter, say, I'm building the top 3 hockey goals of day 7 of the Olympics. So we can filter down day 7 hockey, full game replays, and just get a list of those assets. Once I find those assets, then I bring them into my media bin. And that basically gives me a workspace that I can use to work with those assets. And then I search within those video assets to find the little chunk of video that I'm looking for, that I'm going to use to build my new asset. And then I use that to create a new edition clip. I drag that onto a video timeline, select a thumbnail. So again, I can use a video frame within the existing assets to create a thumbnail that will represent my asset. And then basically I can save that asset through the RCE back into the CMS. And then the last step, the step 9 there, is that we have a web service that's used to transform that EDL, again, into a composite manifest. Okay, so let's just jump right into it. All right, so what I've got here is basically a little mock-up of the EBO. Again, that's the CMS that each of the broadcasters used for the Olympics. And what I've done is just as described, I've gone in here to EBO and I've created a new video asset. Obviously, there's a bunch of fields here I can use to describe the metadata of this new asset. And what I've done, the important thing is I've given it a title. The video asset that I'm going to create is the top 3 goals of the day. And I've saved it. And so now what I do is just simply open the RCE. Okay, so it's loading. It's connected back up to the CMS through some web services that the CMS provides that gives it a list of the video assets that are available. So now what I can do is exactly what I described a few minutes ago. I could go down here and select, day 7 of the games. I could select hockey, and I could select a full event replay. So in other words, I just want to look on day 7. I want hockey games, and I want streams that are a full event replay, the full hockey game. And so then I could do a search. Obviously, I don't have the full CMS here. We just have the 4 assets that I'm going to use today for the demo. But it's essentially what I have now here is the results of my search that I can then look through. I'll go ahead and get rid of this search pane, get rid of some of this other stuff, and we can take a look at each of these assets. So now I have a candidate set of source assets for this clip that I'm going to create. I can actually, right here within the search or library, I can actually preview the asset, see if it's the asset that I want to use. I can do that on each one of these. So the next thing I'm going to do is take the 3 games that I want to use. They just happen to be here. I'm going to take this game right here. I use the little plus in the top right-hand corner to add it to my media bin, which is, again, the workspace that I'm going to use to create my assets. So I'm going to hit plus on that one, plus on this one, and on that one as well. And so what that's done now is it's added all 3 of those assets over into this workspace that I'm going to use. Okay. All right, we're off to a good start. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at this game here between the Czech Republic and Slovakia. See if we can find some good goals in there. So I'm going to start playing this. and I can expand it to take up that whole area. And now let's take a look at some of the kind of the shuttle controls that I can use to search around within this video asset to find what I'm looking for. Now, I guess before we move on, the first thing to point out is kind of to that gentleman's question, what you're seeing here is actually just a smooth stream. So again, this was a stream that ran live on the site as the event was happening. It was live encoded. It was stuck on origin. People were probably consuming it on the site as a live stream. I'm also consuming it in the RCE to find that goal within that existing asset. So again, the live stream is there, it's sitting on origin, and I'm just looking for the chunk of it that I want to reuse in this new asset that I'm creating. So you can do all the normal kind of things that you would expect. I can seek around on this timeline. You can do some of the cool stuff that we added with smooth streaming. I can actually rewind on the timeline. I can fast forward. And I can even do a slow motion. Okay, so that's all good, but trying to use all of that to find the individual goals within that stream could be pretty laborious. It's a 3-hour stream. If I have to keep seeking around to try to find the goals, it's going to take me quite a while to get this done. And the whole thing is I want to get it done really quick. So one of the things that we did for the Olympics is that each of our streams has metadata integration. What I mean by that is that there was a parallel play-by-play stream that was running with each live stream. So as the hockey game was going on, we were getting a play-by-play metadata feed from the IOC that was telling us everything about what was happening in that game. Every time there was a penalty scored, every time there was a substitution, every time there was a goal, et cetera, et cetera. So we have all that metadata. And one of the things that that metadata gives us is it tells us exactly where each one of those events happens within the stream. And so this is a specific kind of extensibility item or customization that we made specifically for the Olympics in the RC, and it kind of gives you an idea of the customizations that you can make within the RC to fit your specific scenarios. So if I go over here to the right, what I have is a little module that was developed for the RC that integrates with that metadata. So what you're looking at is basically a listing of all those play-by-play events for that stream. So I can just do a search here. I can go in here and say, give me all the penalties. And then I can click on each one of those, and you'll see what we're doing is we're jumping to that point in the stream, and then we're automatically setting a mark in. So we're trying to give a real quick shortcut for the editor to be able to do this as quickly as possible. So we jump to that point, and what we do is we actually set a mark in about 5 seconds before the penalty, so they have a starting point. If they don't like where that mark in is, they can adjust it a little bit, but we at least give them a starting point to work with. Okay, so what I'm looking for is goals. So let me do that instead. So I'm going to search for goal. And now here's a listing of all the goals that were scored in the game. And let's just jump to a different one and play so you can see what I'm talking about. So again, when I clicked on that, it automatically set a mark in for me and then jumped to that mark in point. And now what I'm doing is basically playing from that mark in to see how good of a job it did. It looks like it grabbed a little bit early, so probably on this one, there's actually the goal. You might want to cut that down a little bit, set the mark in a little bit, but I can do all that adjustment here. So for the purposes of this one, I'm actually going to grab this second goal. So again, it jumped to that point, it set the mark in, and now let me show this one. So for that one, notice that it happened really quick. And so on this one specifically, I want to grab a little bit more of that footage right before the hockey game. Hold on a second. Right before the goal, just to show kind of the lead up to the goal. And so let me do that. So another feature here within the editor is I can actually zoom in on this timeline. Obviously, with a very long game like a hockey game, I have a 3-hour timeline. It becomes very difficult to work with that timeline and get the granularity that I need. So I can actually use the controls here to actually zoom right in on that particular part of the timeline. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump back a couple of seconds on the timeline, set a new mark in, and then play. Okay, and that looks about right. And there was a question there? No, very good question. So the question is, are you bound to chunk boundaries? In other words, can I only do my mark in at each one of the chunk boundaries? And absolutely not. We actually have frame granularity. So I know that diagram kind of inferred that we were stuck to chunk boundaries, but we can actually set our mark in anywhere within the chunk, and we can individually address. So we'll actually grab the fragment and then leap forward into the point where you set the mark in. One more question? Okay. Yeah, so the question is the metadata and where is it stored? And there's actually two different parts of that question. The metadata that you see that I'm searching on there is actually stored within the smooth stream. So when we're running the live smooth stream, we were actually injecting the metadata at the same time. So that's kind of on the ingest side. Now the metadata that I'm going to create within my RC session and then output actually gets put into the project file, which is the output of the RCE. And then I can do any number of things with it. Okay, one more question.
Yeah, when you scrub, do you hear the audio? Because a lot of our clients, they need to hear the pop. It's not specific to this type of content, but certain type of content, they need to hear the very first time audio comes in so they can make chapter slots.
Right.
Can you scrub the audio very significantly? Does that work? Or?
Well, you can certainly move frame by frame. So, one of the things that I'll just show it to you right here. These two controls right here will allow me to move one frame at a time. And I could play from that point to see the audio, but it's not going to quite give the richness of editing I think that you're looking where you could actually see the audio and look for the audio to rise or anything like that. So it's a little more crude than that. You could certainly go to a particular frame, set a mark in, and then play for it from there and see if you got what you were looking for. But that's when I say it's rough cut, that's one of the ways that it's rough cut. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to do one more, and then we should probably get going.
The metadata, is that an automated process that you're injecting into the smooth stream, or is someone manually typing that?
Okay, so the question was the metadata that we're injecting in here, is it some sort of automated system? And the answer is yes. And it's a capability of smooth streaming in that you can have video fragments, you can have audio fragments, but you can also have metadata fragments as well. So Delta Tray was receiving the metadata stream from the IOC, and then was packaging that metadata in an XML format and injecting it into the stream just like any other fragments. So you basically have an origin that's accepting video and audio from the encoder, but it's also accepting metadata fragments from the CMS as well. And then it takes care of, basically Delta Tray puts a timestamp on it so that then smooth streaming will synchronize the video, the audio, and the metadata as well. Okay, one more. Yep. So the question is, was this a particular? So it's a capability of smooth streaming in general, and it's essentially the metadata format is a customizable format. Basically, any XML format. You essentially just need to package it into a fragmented MPEG-4, which is how all video and audio comes. So yes, there was a specific format that was put together for Vancouver that we knew how to consume on the player, which is the primary place that we were consuming this was on the player. But it's customizable to whatever your scenario is, whatever type of data you have, type of schema. Okay, let me move on. All right, so I took that existing mark in, and I adjusted it a little bit, moved it back so that we could grab a little bit more of the lead up to the goal. All right, now I'm going to continue to play through. I want to grab a little bit of the footage afterwards. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Yep, we'll stop it there, and now I'll just do a mark out. So now I've got a mark in and a mark out on the timeline. So I've essentially established the chunk of video that I want to use from within this asset. And now all I need to do is very simply just grab it and drag it and pull it down onto my timeline. And so now I'm starting to build up this timeline down here. All right, so let me get out of this one, and I'm just going to go do the exact same thing on the 2 other hockey games I have in here. So just going to grab the Sweden versus Germany game. I've got the same sort of metadata integration here, so I'm going to search on goal. And there's 2 goals. I'm going to select this one right here. I'm going to trust that that mark in's okay. I'm going to go ahead and play from there. Let it play through a little bit. Pause it and set my mark out. And one more thing I should have mentioned earlier is an additional thing that I can do here, just one more kind of help with setting these mark in and mark out, is I can actually preview what I've found here. There's a little feature here that allows me to pop into subclip mode, and basically what this does is it'll constrain playback between the 2 mark in and mark out. So if I go into this mode and then hit play, it's essentially just going to play from the mark in to the mark out, standard kind of video editing stuff. Okay, so I've got the goal from that game as well. I'll just do that with the 3rd one here as well.
The Vancouver 2010 Olympic Winter Games on CTV.
Okay. And I'll grab this one. Use the existing mark in as well.
And here is Niedermeyer, the Cranbrook, BC native, for Boyle. To Heatland. Corey Vikingstad tries to pick up the loose puck. Marlowe takes it away from him for Thornton. And Joe Thornton whips it back to Pryor. Corner shoots, goal!
And again, if I didn't want to sit through all that, I could use the fast forward or something like that as well to jump forward a little bit. All right, that looks good. I'll pause it there, set the mark out, drag that onto my timeline. And so again, now I'm building up that timeline at the bottom. What I can do, I collapse this at the beginning, but I'll open it up now. We have a preview player over here on the right-hand side, which allows me to preview what I have on the timeline. So you'll see as I jump around, I can see frames within these clips. I can certainly play them. All that kind of good stuff. Okay, so I'm off to a pretty good start. This is going to be kind of the core of this new video asset that I'm creating. I've got 3 goals from 3 different games. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and save the asset. And what happened when I clicked that save button is that the RCE called a web service on my CMS that said, hey, for that video asset that I was working on, here's the project file that I just produced. And so now the CMS has my project, so I'm free to close. And actually, what I did there as well, when I saved, it went ahead and created a composite manifest for me as well. So it took that project file that I produced in the RCE and transformed it into a composite manifest. You had a question about?
For the preview player, are you generating composite in memory on the client, or are you actually pushing your project to the service to generate the?
So what I'll tell you, for the purpose of the demo, I'm basically taking the project file, running it through the transform to build the composite manifest, and writing a file to local disk. what we did for the Olympics is it would actually write to local disk and then get uploaded through a Signiant job to Origin. And that was the publish step. And yep. So, okay, now I've closed the RC. I'm going to just jump into a preview player here so we can just see what I have built so far. And so there's the goal that I cut out. Now, I mentioned that one of the important things is that I'd be able to, that this asset be like any other asset, any other smooth streaming asset. So you can see I can seek around on the timeline. I can do fast forward just like I can on any other smooth streaming asset. I can do slow motion, all that kind of good stuff. All right, so I've got the basics here, but it's definitely not something that that we would release to the NBC Olympics site. We want to add a little bit more zing to it. So I'm going to go back into the RCE. I'm going to open up the same project that we were working on just a second ago. I'll get rid of this. I'm going to expand our timeline. We can do that down here like we did up above. There's my 3 goals. Now, the first thing is, in playing back that asset, I realized that on this first one, we grabbed a little bit too much content at the end. So I just want to cut that out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play it. And let's just cut it right there. So one of the things that I can do within the RCE is that I can go down here on the timeline, and I can just press S, and it basically just chops up that existing clip on the timeline into 2 different assets, and then I can get rid of the second part of it. And then I can slide, didn't mean to do that. I can slide that over here to the other ones to join it up. And then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to link these up. There we go. So that I can move them around on the timeline together. Okay. All right, so now we're in good shape. We got the 3 goals. So now what I want to do is, like I said, I want to add a little bit more production value to it, and give it a little bit more zing, brand it a little bit, and make it look like a clip that would live on NBCOlympics.com. So one of the things I have in here in my media bin is I have this folder here called interstitials. And what this is a folder, and I'll jump in there in a second, is little bumpers, interstitials, transitions, etc. And it's here automatically. If you notice, I never added that to my media bin. I didn't have to go through some sort of search and add it to my media bin. And the way that it got there is that we have a default project type. And obviously this is very customizable, but in my default project type, essentially what I did was I defined that interstitials folder would be there, that's pre-populated with the number of assets that I know that almost every project is going to use. So I have it there ready for me whenever I need it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this interstitials folder. I'll zoom in a little bit so we can get a better look at them. And let me just play a couple so you know what I'm talking about. So these are just little bumpers and transitions that I can use just to insert and brand these clips. And so what I'm going to do is, the first thing I want to do is I want to add a head slate and a tail slate to my clip. So I'm just going to go up here to this one. Looks pretty good. I'm just going to drag it down onto my timeline. And then obviously I'll just drag these over to meet up with that one. So now I've got my head slate, or kind of my pre-roll or introduction into the clip. And then here I've also got a tail slate as well. And I'll just drag that onto the end of my timeline. Okay, pretty good. Now, the other thing I want to do is, this is the top 3 goals of the day. So I want to add a little intro into each goal, just saying, goal number 1, goal number 2, goal number 3. And I have 3 little interstitials here for doing that. Here's 1, 2, and 3. I'll just play it so you can see what I'm talking about. And I want to add those in between at the beginning of each goal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down. I've got a bunch of assets. They're all strung together and I want to insert these into the timeline. So I'm going to put the timeline in what's called ripple mode, which allows me to drag something in between two assets, and it'll ripple everything out for me. So I'm just going to take this one, and I'm going to drag it in and put it right at the beginning of the Czech-Slovak game. And I'll take this one, I'll put it right at the beginning of the Sweden-Germany game, and the third one, and we'll add right here at Canada-Norway. Well, didn't go where I wanted, so let's rearrange it. Okay, now we're back in business. All right, so let's take another look at this. So I'm gonna save it, exit out, and let's just preview it so we can see what we have again so far. So again, there's my head slate. Then the transition into the little interstitial for goal number 1. And then the first hockey game. So I'll just fast forward so you can see each one of those. Okay. All right, so we're getting better. We're getting closer to the end result that I want here. But there's a couple more things that I want to do. I talked about metadata. So I want to add a little metadata to this clip. So I'm going to jump back into the RCE. And the first thing I want to do is I want to add an ad insertion. So obviously we need to make money off of these clips that we're producing. So I actually want to drop a mid-roll ad insertion into this RCE clip. And so what I'm going to do there is, first off, I need to go back into my media bin and into those interstitials, and I have a little transition clip here. Let me zoom in. Play it for you so you know what it looks like. And basically what it is, it's just a little interstitial, about three seconds long. And I'm going to drop that into my timeline, and that gives me an area where I know I'm safe to run an ad. Obviously, I don't want to run an ad someplace where I might accidentally stamp over part of the action. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this little interstitial, and I'm going to drop it in here right there, and then I'm going to take and double click on the timeline right here within the RCE, and that brings up a little context menu where I'm going to tell it that I want to drop in an ad. And I'm not going to go into too many details about how exactly this is done in smooth streaming, but essentially what I'm doing here is that it's given me a little dialogue, and this is again a customization that we did specifically for the Olympics, where I'm telling it what type of ad I want to play. We had different templates that describe different ad pods, how many ads are in the pod, what their lengths were, etc. And I'm telling it I want to insert a type A. That's it. And so now you can see the little bubble that's telling me that I have an ad insertion there. So that's good. A little more metadata I want to add to this. I want to do timeline markers. So if you checked out the NBC Olympics video player during the games, you notice that we had little hash marks on the timeline that would show me where important events happened in the timeline. I want to add those to my RC clip as well. So I'm going to double click there at the start of the Czech-Slovak game, and I'm going to type in Slovakia goal. And that's going to add a little metadata to this timeline that will tell the player when it plays back this video clip to add a hash mark right there, which allows users to jump right to that point in the action and gives a little context for what's happening. So I'm going to do that for each one of these. Just go here, add another marker. This is the Sweden goal. And then lastly, the Canada goal. Okay. All right, I think we're pretty much done. Now, the last thing I want to do here, just to fully complete this asset, is we talked about the ability to create a thumbnail. So I'm going to go back here to the preview player. And what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to jump back in the timeline and try to find a frame of video that I think represents this clip pretty well. It looks like I found one already that's pretty good. You know, I might do a frame advance just to find exactly the frame that I'm looking for, and then I click the little button right here that says grab a thumbnail. Now what it's doing now is it's actually, because it's a smooth stream, we've got everything from 400 kilobit at the bottom all the way up to full HD 720p at the top. It knows what frame I want. It's reaching back, grabbing the 720p frame, the highest quality frame, 1280 by 720, and grabbing a thumbnail of that highest quality frame, and it's saving that into my project. So I can then use that thumbnail to represent this asset. And I can go over and take a look at that here. So here's that thumbnail that I just grabbed. Okay, it's looking pretty good. Let me go ahead and save it. Close out of it. And let's look at our finished asset. So there's my bumper again. I can go into key events. Here's each one of the goals. I'm used to jump around on the timeline. I can do my seek, fast forward, all that kind of good stuff. And then here's the hash marks that I was talking about. There's the Sweden goal. There's the Slovakia goal. But more importantly, I want to show the added version.
All your favorite Olympic stars in sports on one network, all the time.
There we go. Start to finish. Any questions about that before I move on to the... Great. Okay, I want to do one last thing. While I've been up here, I've had a live stream running. So I talked about the ability to cut from not only on-demand smooth streams, but also live smooth streams. And this was a very important, hold on a second. This was a very important thing for NBC because, again, when Phelps wins his 8th gold medal, they want to clip immediately. They don't want to wait until that stream ends and then cut from it. They want to cut directly from the live stream. And so what I want to do now is just show a quick demo of cutting from a live stream. Really quick question? Say that again. I didn't quite cut it.
There's still for the video. The image for the still. When you go to the video, play, not play. Immediately there's still, large still.
Right. Yeah, so not sure I quite understand, so you might want to come up after. But essentially what I'm doing is I'm going into the video stream, grabbing an image out of the video, and then I'm generating that into a PNG, which gets saved into my project. And how we used it for the Olympics was we would then turn that into an actual PNG file that would get uploaded to Origin. And so the link for that video asset would be represented by the PNG. Come up afterwards. I don't think I'm quite answering your question. Okay, so now what I want to do, I have a live stream running. And so I just want to show you very quickly cutting from a live stream. It's all basically the same thing, but I just want to show. So I'm going to go back in here to my CMS. I'm going to create a new video asset. This one, I'm going to use that women's downhill. I'll save it and launch the RCE. So now I'm back here within search. I know here's the women's downhill. I'm just simply going to add it to my media bin. I go over here. Let's take a look at it. And now I can play. Now really the only difference here is that you'll notice there's one more control on my video controls right here. And what this control is it's a button that allows me to jump to the live point within this live stream. Other than that, it's the exact same video editing experience. So I can seek back anywhere on this timeline. And essentially what I'm going to do, I don't want to look for the start of a run, so I'm just going to go here, randomly select a start, and then I'll actually just jump to the live point and set our mark out at the live point at that particular time. The mark out's not going to move with the live point, but I'm setting the mark out at the live point at this particular time. And then I'll save this, exit out of the RCE, and we'll preview. think it was going. Not sure what's happening there. Did I save it? Oh, I didn't put it on my timeline. That's a major flaw. All right, let me do that one more time. I was trying to be too quick. So there's my mark in. I'll go to the live point. I'll set the mark out. I'll drag it to the timeline this time. And now I'll save it. Okay, easy enough. So now what I have is I have the women's downhill stream. It's running live. And I have the ability to take an individual skier. Let's just say somebody had a major crash, and we want to get a clip of that out while the women's downhill is still happening. I could go into the RCE, do a mark in, mark out either side of the crash, drag it to my timeline, publish it, and within seconds I've got the new clip out there. And again, all these fragments are coming from the live stream. Okay, one more quick question.
How did you cut out the real-time advertisement and
Yeah, basically the question is, how did you cut out the real-time advertisement? And just basically the same method that I used there.
some kind of delay between the real-time and
Yeah, now keep in mind, so the question is, there's some sort of, so now we're not using the output of the RC as the live stream. We're only producing an on-demand asset based on the live stream. So when the stream was live, everybody was watching the live broadcast feed that had the broadcast commercials in it. When we wanted to produce an on-demand clip from it, that's where we would cut out the broadcast ads and produce a new asset. Okay. All right, let me move back to my slides. And we'll just finish up really quick, and then we'll do a few more questions. Okay, there's the demo of the live stream we already did. So a couple of metrics. We talked about how each of these broadcasters used it. Some metrics of what they accomplished. So between the three of them, they produced about 200 highlight clips over the course of the games. They had about 300 hours of content that they produced through the RCE. And one of the important things, again, it's all about speed and reducing costs. They were able to train up 50 editors in about 3 hours' time. So one of the things that we have with the RC is a usage guide that will be available to you. Basically starting about 2 or 3 days before the games, they all brought in teams of interns that they sat in a room. We gave them about 3 hours with the usage guide and some hands-on training, and they were ready to use the RCE to build the types of clips that I showed you. Savings. Now, obviously, that's an important part of it. So, what do we save by using the RCE to build these types of assets rather than using traditional production? Number one, storage. Again, we're repurposing existing assets. So I'm just building a new XML file that is basically a playlist pointing at existing assets. So dramatic reduction in storage. We use desktop PCs, even laptops to do this. No specialized video workstations, no post-processing, and probably more importantly, no specialized transcode infrastructure to do this. All right, so I talked about the RC does many things other than what we used in the Olympics. So here's just a brief overview of some of the other things. It will actually use multiple audio tracks. So if you want to put multiple audio tracks on your timeline, it can do that. We couldn't use that for the Olympics because we were using smooth streams, and we don't actually have an ability right now to be able to kind of meld two audio tracks and blend them together. But that's something the RCE can do when you're using it as an EDL generator that goes through transcode. You can certainly use that. Another thing that it can do is add comments. So this is really important when the clips that you're producing with the RC need to go through some sort of approval process. Let's just say I sat there with the RC, I built that clip, and now it needs to go through some sort of approval process. It might go to some manager who might want to watch it and then add some comments. And we can add comments in a couple of different ways. We can do text comments that will display below the video, but one of the really cool things here is we can actually do ink comments. So you can imagine I have a particular frame of video, maybe in that specific example where I had the Slovakia game and I grabbed a little bit too much content after the goal. The approver can actually just draw on the screen and say, hey, get rid of this, last 10 seconds of this. And it actually saves it as a XAML overlay that becomes part of the metadata for that clip. A couple other things, we can actually do some titles. So we can do titles built in XAML, lower thirds, title cards, all that kind of stuff. And I think the rest is pretty self-explanatory. All right, so deployment, how do you get started with it? So the call to action here is basically start rethinking your content production workflow. Are there cases where the content, the asset that you want to build already lives in existing content? And especially in the case where it's your existing content is smooth streaming, maybe there's an opportunity for you to use the rough cut editor instead of going through a traditional workflow of building a complete new asset, transcode, et cetera, of just using the RC to assemble new assets, just like I showed you here. Secondly, go out and get the RCE. And there's the URL for where it's going to be posted. One thing I'll mention is if you run out there right now, it's not actually there right at this second, but it will be there by the end of today. We have a program manager internally that owns the RCE. If you have any questions about the RCE, you're welcome to either direct them at Asil or myself, either one. Integrate it into your CMS, and we have a whole list. We have a whole set of documents, and I'll just open those up very quickly. We have a whole set of documents that talk about how to extend the RC, how to build the kind of customized modules that I showed you in my demo for searching metadata or integrating with your CMS or whatever types of scenarios that, or attributes you have in your particular scenario. We have an installation guide, et cetera. So it's fairly well documented to help you do that extensibility and customization. And one more thing there at the bottom is that we're very much working to get the RC open sourced. It won't be there initially when you go to that URL above. You won't find the source code for it tonight. But that's something that we're hoping to do in the next couple of months is actually release the source code for the RC so that you can even do deeper customization. Okay. Any other questions? Yep, go ahead. Oh, thank you. Right over there.
When you guys were bringing in the metadata for the game, you guys were bringing it into the timeline associated with the video that started at a particular time.
Mm-hmm.
You guys come about aligning that up. You said Delta Drive?
Yeah. So the question's really about that metadata, that play-by-play data that was synchronized with the video. And essentially the way that worked was we receive a metadata stream from the IOC. And we know the start time of the video and when that happens. And when we receive that metadata, we basically know the wall clock time and when we receive that as well. So we take that, we transform the data they give us into the XML format that we want to use that's ready for our player to consume. And then we package it into an MPEG-4, and you put a timestamp on that MPEG-4 of when it should be delivered. And so smooth streaming, the server knows, okay, I have this fragment of metadata, and it's to be delivered at this particular time. So you have the video and audio is done the same way. Each video and audio fragment has a timestamp as well. So it essentially can synchronize the delivery of the fragments with the audio and video. And then within that package, there is also another timestamp which basically says where did that event happen. So if it was a goal, we had a custom XML schema that we defined that would define when the goal happened, who scored it, all that kind of stuff. So the way the player used that was that it had the wall clock time of when the goal was scored, and we could use that to display on the timeline. Okay? One more up here.
Didn't you have a lot of trouble with deleting assets? How do you handle that in the CMS system? Because you have a lot of heritage from different programs.
Not sure I completely understand. Did we have problems with deleting?
Not creating a new file, but you're making a new clip based on 3 other files.
Right.
And one of those are deleted in the CMS.
Oh, okay. So the question is, did we have problems with basically the source clips being deleted out from underneath us? And what I would say is we never deleted assets. They could be unpublished, but the source asset never disappeared. So it may not be published anymore, but it's still an asset that existed on origin. So we never actually physically deleted any assets off origin. So it wasn't really a problem for us. Go ahead. Sure. Yeah, so the question is, does it just work with smooth streaming, or can you work with VC1? Yeah, certainly. So that's what I was trying to say is the output of the RC is an EDL, essentially. That EDL can then be transformed into a format that can be consumed by any of your transcode vendors to then reach into the source assets and output a traditional asset, a VC1 or H.264 or any other asset. Yeah. So again, I was just focusing on how we used it for the Olympics, which was based on all smooth streaming material and producing new smooth streams. But let me go back here and then I'll come over. Go ahead.
I saw it after you dropped the advertisement. I saw the player is disabled for the fast forward. Is it controlled by the metadata?
So you said when I dropped an asset onto the timeline. Yep.
After you play it, the player, you play the advertisement.
Yeah.
The fast forward is disabled.
Gotcha. So the question is really about the playback of the clip, and when I got to the ad, it had disabled basically all my video controls. Yeah. No, that's all specific business logic to the video player that we built to consume that composite manifest. So the composite manifest just specifies what video to play. And we had business logic in our player that says, when we hit an ad break, when we go into break, disable the controls. So that's completely customizable to your scenario. Where's the data for what particular part? I'm not quite understanding.
How the player knows that part is the advertisement?
Oh, so I didn't actually. Okay, I see your question. I didn't actually drop the ad video onto the timeline. Remember, what I dropped was a transition onto the timeline, and I put an ad insertion marker on it. What the player gets delivered is that marker. And it tells it, okay, here's a place to insert an ad. And what actually happens is then the player makes a call out to double-click, retrieves the ad asset it should play, and inserts it at that point. Okay? So I didn't actually drop the asset in there. That's all done at runtime by the player. Go ahead. Sure. Yeah. So there's a couple of different things. Again, the RC lived before the Olympics, and the scenario there was it was consuming any number of source formats. They weren't smooth streaming at that point because there wasn't smooth streaming, but it could be a H.264 stream, VC1 stream, any number of source formats. It would consume them. You could do your mark in, mark out, drag them to the timeline, all that kind of stuff, and then output an EDL. In that case, what you would do then is transform that EDL into the right format that fits your transcode vendor, and then it would transcode and output a H.264 or whatever type of stream that you want as an output.
You
Sure, as long as your transcode vendor can deal with those input formats. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
What was that asset that you dropped into the timeline when you were going to run an ad? Is it just a video with all black frames and no audio?
No, it was just a, maybe I can jump back to it really quick. What we used was just like a 3 or 4 second transition. And it just gives us something where we can drop an ad in, right? You don't want to drop an ad in over the top of the hockey game, right? So it just gives us a little transition we can drop an ad in over the top of.
Do all the, does your cloud manifest have to be contiguous, or is it possible to have empty spaces within a manifest where there wouldn't be anything playing for a second or two?
No, you would have to drop in something that had black frames.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Let me just do one more, and then I better cut it off so they can set it. Oh, I need to set it up. Okay. Why don't we, I'll cut it off and then just come up and ask my questions up here.